Hello there, and thanks for joining me. I'm Corel Painter Master Aaron Rutten, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to create a portrait or any other kind of painting using a brush that's made out of text. This text could be your name, it could be your signature, it could be a word. Here's an example of the painting I'll be creating using my name as a brush. From a distance, it doesn't look like much, but when you zoom in, you can see that it says Aaron Rutten everywhere. So let's go ahead and start by creating a new canvas. I'm going to choose a common canvas size of 11 by 14 inches at 300 dpi. And we'll want to make sure that the width is 11 and the height is 14 so that it's in a portrait orientation. So this will be our canvas for our portrait painting. Let's also create an additional canvas that we'll use to create our brush. So the reason why we chose our canvas for our portrait first is because we want to have an idea of how large our text needs to be. Because if we make this brush too small, when we paint with it, the text is going to look kind of blurry or blocky. So we want to make the text too big rather than too small. So if we go ahead and change the measurement from inches to pixels, we can see that we want our brush to be maybe somewhere in the range of 2000 pixels would be fine, because we'll probably have our brush smaller rather than bigger while we're painting. So let's go ahead and change this to 2000. And some people's names are longer than others, but we could go ahead and just try 1000 for now. And if we need to make this taller or wider, we can do so later. So now that we have our canvas here, let's go ahead and go to our text or our type tool. Now, if you want to, you can change your font ahead of time and the point size, but we can just go ahead and just create some text first and then change it after. So let's just tap once to create a text field. And I'm going to use my name for this particular piece. If I drag across to select this text here, I can then go to the font and I can try some other fonts. I can also change the point size to make it bigger or smaller. Again, we want this to be pretty big. So I'm going to make it take up almost the whole canvas here. And then we'll also want to change the color of this text. So we'll click here on the color swatch, and let's just make it a neutral gray color. Now these are custom swatches that I have in my workspace. If you don't have these swatches, you can just go over here to the color picker and pick a neutral gray color. The reason why we make it gray is because that's how we have to set it up if we want to be able to use this brush with multiple colors. So I'll go ahead and use the move tool to reposition this text and just center it. And then I'll go ahead and select the crop tool, and I'm just going to crop down a little bit tighter here. I'll click on the check to commit this crop. Next, we'll want to right-click on the text layer, and we'll want to choose Convert to Default Layer. Then we'll go ahead and group this layer using Ctrl-G. And now that we have a group, we can go ahead and make that group into a nozzle. So I have some shortcuts for doing that here in the Image Host palette. This is a custom palette, but you can also get to those shortcuts through the Nozzle Library palette, which is found under Window, Media Library Panels, and then Nozzles. And if you look in the top right of this palette, you can get all these shortcuts here. So with that group selected, I'm going to click on Make Nozzle from Group. It's going to immediately create a new canvas with that artwork inside of it. Just go ahead and save it. You don't need to do anything else besides that. And you can go ahead and give this a name. I'm going to call this AR Text. We want to save this as a Painter riff. And then you can just go ahead and close this by going to File and Close. Now let's go back to our portrait canvas by going to Window. We'll go back to that document that we created. And let's test out our brush. Let's click on Load Nozzle. And let's select that riff file that we created. And now our nozzle is loaded. However, we won't be able to paint with it until we select an Image Host brush. And the Image Host brush controls how the nozzle comes out of the brush. Do you want it to spray? Do you want it to come out single file? Do you want it to follow the curve of your brush? That's what all of these Image Host brushes control. So for this particular brush, we could really choose any of these options. Let's try the first one, linear size P. So it's going to come out in a linear fashion. So you can see if I press down firm, I get bigger text. If we pick something different like spray size P, angle W, the spray is going to be controlled by the pressure. So it's going to spray out further the harder you press. If I make my brush bigger, I get bigger type. Next, let's try linear size P, angle D. This is like the linear brush, except it's going to follow the curve of your brush while you're painting. So now we know how to make brush strokes. How do we change the color of the brush strokes? To do that, we want to look at the color versions of these brushes. There's linear size P color, there's one for the spray, and there's one that follows the angle of your brush. So same brushes, it's just the bottom ones use color. So I'm going to try linear size P color. And then rather than choose your color here in your main color, what you'll need to do is click on the additional color. And that'll be the color that you'll be painting with. So you always have to remember now you need to switch to additional color for your Image Host brushes. Most other brushes are going to use your main color, in which case you'll have to switch back to that. So if you're selecting a color in your painting and it's not coming out the right color, just look over here and make sure that you have the right swatch selected. So we have this bright orange red that we can test. And you can see that our custom brush is that color. If we pick blue for that color, then we get blue. And we can get really any color that we want. So now that we know how to use our brush, let's take a look at how to do a really quick portrait. Now, if you wanted to paint this from scratch, you could paint it from scratch. If you wanted to do a sketch or use a reference photo, you can certainly do that. Since this is just going to be a quick tutorial, I'm just going to plug in an image and then trace on top of it. So I'm going to go to File, Place, and then I'm going to locate a photo of myself here and click on Open. I'll just go ahead and click on OK. And then I'm going to go to Edit, Free Transform. I'll click on OK to convert this into a regular layer. I'm going to drag from the corner, and to make sure that I don't squish myself here, I'm going to hold Shift, and that'll lock everything into proportion. I'm going to scale myself up here so that I fit on the canvas. Then I'm going to click on the check to commit. And I'm just going to position it somewhere where I like it. I'm going to go ahead and name this layer to Reference, and I'm going to reduce the opacity of it so I can barely see it. Next, I'm going to create a new layer on top of that, and I'm going to call this Dark. And I'm going to kind of separate the dark, mid-tone, and light areas of my face into separate layers, just to make them easier to work with. I'm going to zoom in a bit here, and then I'm going to select the Linear Size P Angle D color brush, and I'm just going to fill in some little dark areas here. Now this is abstract, so you don't have to worry about getting it absolutely perfect. It can be a little off and a little sloppy. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to hunt around for the absolute darkest areas in this piece and just put those in. And those will be very few and far between. You can see there's a little bit here. Now depending on the direction that I paint with this brush, that's going to control the direction of the text. So I want to keep that in mind. I want to use brush strokes of different directions. There's some here in the hair that we can put in. Let's create another new layer. Let's call this dark gray. Let's go ahead and move that below the dark layer. And let's select our additional color and let's pick kind of a dark gray color like this. Let's put in some of that. We can use a bigger brush now just to fill in some of these areas really quickly. Try not to overpaint too much if you can. And then periodically you want to zoom out and evaluate how your piece looks. You want to hide your reference layer and see what you have so far. Still got quite a bit of work to do. So I'm going to continue adding layers that get progressively lighter and lighter until I've built up the three-dimensional form of the face the way I'd like it to be. Now I've gone ahead and created a layer for white, but before I put that in, I'm just going to create a layer below that. And I'm going to call that tone. I'm going to go ahead and tone the canvas. I want to make sure that I select that color for my main color, not my additional color that I was using. So I'll just click on this little arrow to flip them. I'll make sure that I click on the main color here, and I'll just pick kind of a light gray color. And we'll fill the canvas with that light gray just to tone it so that white will show up. We'll need to go ahead and move our reference layer up above our tone. And let's go ahead and change the composite method of our reference to multiply. That'll make it a little bit easier to see with the underlying layers. I'm going to reduce the opacity of it a bit more. I'm going to go to that white layer. I'm going to click on my additional color. I'm going to select white. I'm going to go back to my Linear Size P Angle D color brush. And I'm going to fill in some of the light areas now. Just like the blacks, those will be pretty few and far between, mainly just in the eyes. So I'm going to create some intermediate layers. I want some layers that are in between this white and this light gray. So I'll call this lighter gray. I'll go ahead and sample the light gray color that I was using, and I'll just make sure that I make it a little bit lighter than that. So now at this point, you may want to pull up your reference photos so that you can see it. You could either bring it up on your phone or your tablet, or print it out, or put it on a secondary monitor. You could also place it inside a painter using the reference image palette. I'm going to go ahead and do that here. I'm going to open reference image. I'm going to select that image. Now I'll be able to see it while I'm working, and I'm going to make this just a little bit bigger as well. And I'm going to zoom in and pan so we can see the face. We can see there's a little highlight on the nose, so maybe we'll add that on the white layer. It'll be very subtle. Let's go to the lighter gray layer. Let's change our color to that lighter gray. I want kind of an almost white here. Let's put in some of that here on the nose. Maybe here on the cheek a little bit. And on the chin. This is kind of a subtle light gray here. You might not see it very well, but it's there. A little bit underneath the eye on this cheek, kind of on the forehead here, we'll add a little bit. If I zoom in, you can see more clearly what this is doing. It's adding my name as kind of a texture in this area, so it's not just a flat color. Now let's add in some more darks. Let's go to the dark gray layer. Let's add a layer above that. We'll call it darker gray. We'll pick a really dark, almost black. And let's put in a little bit of that. Now you may get to a point to where your brush needs to be kind of small, but if you make it too small, you're not really getting the kind of stroke that you want. So what you would want to do in this case is then maybe switch to the linear size P color brush and just try to use individual stamps to kind of dab like this. So yeah, that's making kind of a line using my name here. If you wanted to get really precise, you could create individual layers here for your name, and then just click with your mouse, select that layer and free transform it with Control T. And you could take it and move it and transform it into place. Maybe I'm going to rotate this a little bit and scale it down a little more. Then I'm kind of building up this eyelash just using a single piece of my name here. If you hold Alt and drag with the Move tool, you can quickly clone these layers to make more of them. I'm going to go ahead and group those strokes, and then I'm going to add some background lighting on a separate layer. I'm going to work on the shirt a little bit. And then at this point, we don't need the reference layer anymore. Let's move that out of the way, and let's go ahead and just merge our paint layers with Control E, and then you can either hide or delete that reference layer. Now I merged my layers to make it a little faster to work, but you could keep yours separate. I'm going to go through and sample with the color sampler and just add some intermediate light and dark tones. I'll also go through with a smaller brush and add some fine details around the eyes and the hair and the nose. I'm constantly looking back and forth at my reference photo, and I'm trying to focus on small areas like just the eye or just the nose. Here and there, wherever it's appropriate, I'm going to add some larger pieces of text and try to fit those in. I'm going to add a little brush variety too using the linear size P color brush. And I'm going to paint strokes that kind of add contour by following the direction of the hair as it's flowing. I'm going to use a small brush to add some fine detail around the eyes. It is really hard to paint with this brush because of its shape, but if you go back and forth between these different techniques I'm showing you, you should be able to fill in any kind of shape that you want. I'm really just working back and forth between light and dark to build up this form the way I want it. And again, I'm paying careful attention to my reference photo and just looking at small sections at a time. I noticed that the nose is looking a little asymmetrical, so I'm going to flip the canvas horizontally just to evaluate it. Sometimes that helps get things a little more symmetrical. I'll also fix the position of the eyes, and then I'll add some tinting on a multiply layer above everything else and add a little sepia and then reduce the opacity so that it's a more subtle blend. Now, after you add the sepia tinting, you may notice that when you try to paint, you end up with the wrong color. Well, that's because you weren't using the additional color, you were stuck on the main color, so you'll have to switch that back. I'm going to add some more detail to the hair, some little wispy hairs that kind of fly off. And then periodically, it's good to zoom out and look at your piece from far away, because if it looks good small, it's generally going to look pretty good large as well. I'm going to add a new layer that's set to a multiply composite method on top of everything else and use the sponge to create some grunge. I'll reduce the opacity to blend it in a little bit better. And then I'll continue adding more fine details here and there, just little dots and dashes and little texture looking things. I'm going to zoom out and make my canvas tiny and work on it while it's tiny. And then as I'm painting, I'm just going to be looking back and forth and comparing the two. I'm going to try to get it as close as I can. You're not going to be able to get it perfect with this brush because this brush is a really hard brush to work with. But if you get pretty close, you're going to get an interesting blend between realistic and expressionistic like you see here. So here's my finished piece. It's a pretty cool effect. If you want to share your version of your portrait, you can feel free to do that on my Facebook page or on my forum. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, take a quick second to like this video and share it with your friends. And if you're new to my channel, don't forget to subscribe to get updates when I release more new videos like this. And if you're interested in some more in-depth painting videos, you can take my free landscape painting crash course for Corel Painter. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.